It was late in the afternoon one day last week, and I was ruminating on the gospel passage for this week when I thought of Monica Lewinsky. Where have you gone, Monica Lewinsky? A lonely nation turns its eyes to you. Woo, woo, woo. We turn our eyes to Monica Lewinsky because the first part of our gospel lesson this morning, we see Jesus calling Matthew, a tax collector, to come and be one of his disciples. Tax collectors were considered moral outcasts in society. They were people of questionable character. Thus, a story like this one about the calling of Matthew helps us fill in the person of Jesus. We understand him, Jesus that is, to be a person who preferred to be around outcasts, losers, and the marginalized of society, rather than to be around the righteous and the pious people. So the question is, what makes someone an outcast? And I say makes because no one chooses to be marginalized or have lower status in society. All social status is bestowed by others. In other words, one can't create one's status in society. That's one of the themes, or the theme in George Bernard Shaw's play Pygmalion. Pygmalion is the kid in high school who tries to be cool, fails, and is branded a poser. You try to be something that you aren't, and others can smell it. And rather than elevating your status, you increase your lower status because social status can only be given to us by others. Status is purely a social phenomenon. Status is one's position within a social hierarchy based upon one's perceived importance to the group or society. As much as we wish, we desire a classless, egalitarian society, in living among others, there's always going to be status. Real equality in society is a myth. There never has been an unstratified society. All societies, even the socialist communist societies, have a social hierarchy. It's just part of being human. Status is a natural mechanism, a universal phenomenon, and a fundamental desire in any social structure. If not ascribed, social positioning will develop based upon the members who are able to make a greater contribution. In other words, if you're good at hunting or defending against enemies, the group will extend disproportionate share of benefits to you as a reward. You will be held in high esteem due to your ability to contribute to the needs of the group or society. So let me give you an example. Many years ago I did youth work, and I used to present to the kids something which was called the Apocalypse Morality Test. Now I'm sure you're probably familiar with it, or something like it. There are 15 survivors in the world after some cataclysmic apocalypse, and there's only food for 10 to survive. So who do you save and whom do you exclude? And the survivors include a doctor, a young female fitness instructor, a chef, and on, and a priest. And I will tell you, every single time I've done this exercise, the priest is first to go. I don't know what that's about. Whatever. My point is, outcasts are made. They're not chosen. Who is an outcast depends upon the way society chooses to live. There are infinite numbers of ways to live. What we eat, how we dress, how we dance, worship, play, and think are all governed by certain customs. And it is called culture. For example, every Oktoberfest, Bavarian men don lederhosen, and women put on dirndl dresses and drink gigantic steins of beer while listening to music with the oompa tuba. Now, couldn't they enjoy the festivities in jeans? Of course they could. But they don't. Because wearing lederhosen and dirndl dresses is an accepted social behavior that individuals follow and expect others to follow. And this is the key point. Throughout the ages, cultural customs become internalized to the point we don't even realize that we do them. Customs become instinctive, below the level of consciousness. We say, that's just the way things are done. That's just the way we do things. Customs and habits are the natural order of the world. Over time, customs take on a moral dimension, which means another's customs, another's habits aren't just different, but they're unnatural and they're immoral. Violations, consequently, are unnatural and require sanctions. Now, it's my understanding that many of you here are expats, expatriates, and if you are, then you're acutely aware of the culture, customs, and habits of living in Mexico. And I'll tell you one. Why does someone set off fireworks at 5:30 in the morning? I don't get that. And then they stop at 6:30. Couldn't they start at 9:30 and then at 10:30? I don't get it. Many years ago, I spent a summer in Guadalajara studying Spanish, and I lived right in the heart of the city. And each day I took a minibus to my instituto. And each morning on my way to the bus stop, I passed by a group of guys outside a food stand having coffee, and they were just hanging out. And each day when I passed, they used to snicker and laugh at me. And I wondered, what's this, some sort of racial thing? What's going on? Well, one day in class, I mentioned this to my instructor, a woman in her 50s. And she was embarrassed and didn't want to tell me what she thought the real issue was. But I insisted. She said that men my age, I was in my 50s at the time, socially didn't wear short pants in public unless at the beach. Well, since the days were hot in August in Guadalajara, I wore shorts. I mean, I'm from Los Angeles, everyone wears shorts. Everyone in the U.S. wears shorts when it's hot. Be that as it may, my instructor suggested I wear long pants and see if that would change. And she was right. Not only did these guys no longer snicker, they began to wave to one another as I passed by, wish one another good day, how you doing, all that. We became cuates, became friends. As we learn in today's gospel lesson, Jesus socialized with rustlers, cutthroats, murderers, bounty hunters, desperados, mugs, pugs, thugs, nitwits, halfwits, dimwits, vipers, snipers, conmen, bushwhackers, hornswogglers, horse thieves, train robbers, bank robbers, and Methodists. If I may quote Hedley Lamar from Blazing Saddles. He socialized with those whom Jewish society didn't accept because they didn't follow the proper customs and habits established when God was a child. And we do the same today. And Jesus did this specifically to say that God loves and ultimately accepts everyone, but also because he knew that all social and cultural rules are subject to change depending upon who is in charge. Thus, I ask only that each of us be aware of how our own personal lives' existence is interpreted through this invisible thing we call culture. And then be open to accepting that others, often the misfits and outcasts, see things differently. They don't see, it's not inferior, and it's just different. And perhaps in some cases better. At least such an awareness will allow us to be kind and gracious to others, even if we disagree with their beliefs. I mean, after all, what is important is not what you think. What's important is how you act. So let me give you an example of something that happened to me recently. A few weeks ago, I attended our annual Diocesan Clergy Conference in Los Angeles. And I find the clergy conference to be a strange experience. People who are the kings and queens of their parishes, we gather in fellowship. However, I find the fellowship is awkward, because being the king or queen in our own churches, we are the center of attention. People approach us. Thus, never having to approach others, when you put a bunch of kings and queens together, we don't know how to socialize. Or we socialize awkwardly. You know, we're like a room full of weebles bumping into one another. Hello, how are you? Where are you from? Hello, where are you from? Hello, hello, where are you from? That's clergy conference in a nutshell. But to encourage fellowship, at this particular clergy conference, we were seated at round tables and tasked by our guest speaker to share certain themes from her presentation. And the first theme concerned lament. We were to turn to the person sitting next to us and share what we lamented, that is, we grieved in our ministry. Now, I have to say that I'm not real comfortable at conferences where we're to share personal information with people we don't know. So anxiously, I turned to my neighbor and we both paused. And she said, I'm a private person. Thus, I'm not good at sharing with people I don't know. And I understood her reasoning. I understood her reasoning because she's a transgender woman. In a soft voice, she shared how she transitioned 17 years ago. That's a long time ago, I said. Yes, she said. Long before the current trend, she replied. I can only imagine how tough it has been, I said to her. She nodded, then slowly continued her story of lament. She used to work in finance in the secular world, but felt the call by God to become an ordained Episcopal priest. She didn't say where she went to seminary. She didn't say where she was ordained. She had hoped to serve in a church. But then she learned that over the years that this would never happen. What she heard over and over by bishops and rectors was that they supported her wholeheartedly in her ministry. I mean, after all, God works through all of us. If one's able to display the gifts required to preach, teach, and do pastoral care in the name of Christ, then it's very difficult to deny and exclude that person from doing so. However, what various bishops and rectors then said was, I'm supportive of your ministry, but my people, my congregants, my diocese would not be. I'd love to hire you, but I can't. So she said, I work in the diocesan office doing accounting and finance. And that broke my heart. Despite being an ordained Episcopal priest, she's prevented from serving a parish. She is excluded. Despite that Jesus is quoted as saying, there are many rooms in my Father's house, there is no room in the house for her. Putting aside whatever your thoughts and feelings are about transgender, focus with me on the personal. We can debate transgender issues, and we should. But we must also not overlook the individual. You know, usually the maxim is don't miss the forest for the trees. However, in this case, don't miss the trees for the forest. Focus on the hurt and the exclusion of the individual. Do you think it was humans who ordained her against God's will? Does God exclude her from the church? Does God exclude her from salvation? Is there no room in God's house for her? How many of us know a transgender person? I'm sure everyone in here has an opinion regarding trans issues, but how many of us actually know a trans person? Is there anyone in your family who is transgender? Like anything that's new and pokes at taboos, our reaction is often fear, especially when we haven't had personal experience with whatever this new issue is. I can tell you that without having listened to her sharing her story, I could see myself repeating what other bishops and rectors have said to her. Thus, I think their reaction says more about their own fears than it does about their congregation's rejection. This morning, I just want to say to you and to myself, put aside the rhetoric on all sides and focus on the individual. Just listen to the individual with interest and honesty as you would your own brother or sister or anyone you love. Do your best not to make it about you. Listen with the ears of God. Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative is to guide every ethical situation in our lives. And the imperative says this: act only according to that principle whereby you can, at the same time, will that it should become a universal law. In other words, in whatever principles you live by in life, those principles must apply equally to everyone. Thus, if you believe God excludes no person who desires and seeks a relationship with God, then the church is not to exclude someone who is transgender. The very thing the church in all religions have over all else in society is our call to inclusion. It is our ace in the hole, because everywhere in society there is exclusion. All of us have felt excluded at some point, whether it be because of our faith or the big ones: race, gender, ethnicity, or physical disability. Or much more personal exclusion, like not being invited to a friend's wedding, or finding out that your coworkers got together after work to unwind and they didn't invite you. We all know the sting of exclusion. Of all places, the church, the synagogue, the temple, or mosque are sanctuaries where we all should be accepted for the broken and flawed people that we are. Jesus constantly told the religious authorities that he came for those who are excluded in life. But we tend to overlook that message. I know that I know that I do. Thus, when I do this, I not only exclude others, but as a result, I also exclude myself.